Hello, everyone. This is the Tennessee Freedom Alliance with your host, Alexander Horat. Before we begin, if you can please subscribe and leave a like on the video, that would be greatly appreciated. Today, we're joined by Tennessee State Senator Page Walley. He represents the 26th District in West Tennessee. Senator Walley brings a unique background to public service as a clinical psychologist, former commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Children's Services, and longtime advocate for families, rural communities, and education. Hello, Paige. We're very happy to have you on the show.
Good afternoon, Alexander. Pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, what inspired your transition from clinical psychology and ministry into long-term public service?
Well, Alexander, I grew up in a very rural area down in our district in Fayette County, and I lived on the Fayette-Hardeman border, the little towns of LaGrange and Grand Junction. Um, After I had gotten my education and had an opportunity to, meet my wife, Mary, start a family, we moved back to Bolivar around 1988, and I was working as a clinical director of the community mental health center there called Quinco, which sits right beside Western Mental Health Institute, which everybody knows in Bolivar. Um, and one of the things that began to, it had already started, but really was reinforced was that I was regularly running into challenges with doing some positive things I felt like in the mental health field. And the explanation I typically got was, well, the state wouldn't allow that, or the state won't finance that, or you have to get permission from the state. And enough of that uh, really got me thinking about maybe the opportunity to do the most good for my area would be to be a part of this, the state. And at that time, our area really was struggling economically, educationally, just was lagging behind much of the rest of the state. And I hadn't had a chance to live around in some other states and see what opportunities in life could be like. So I got inspired to run for public office back in 1990 with the idea of being able to be a part of the state, which in turn would partner and collaborate with local communities to advance opportunity, be that better schools, better roads, attracting jobs, bringing opportunity. And so it was out of that, I guess, inspiration that I decided to make the run. I was very fortunate my first time out to win election in 1990. I defeated a 16-year incumbent in that office and spent 10 years in the House, and then got to a point where because of redistricting, things really looked very different in the composition of my district. And I had young children. It was time to go home and do a better job of providing. And so between the two, I did that. Governor, at that time, Governor Sundquist asked me to come back um, in about 2002, I think, something around there, and run the Department of Children's Services as a commissioner. I had created DCS as a legislator, recognizing that we did not have any centralized um, department and effort to look after the well-being of children and families. All of that work was kind of split up among 6 or 7 other departments. So we wanted to centralize it and focus on it. Governor asked me to come back and run that. I did that until he was term limited out. Then I was invited to Alabama by the new governor there to help them set up and run their uh, state agency that did all of the social services for the people of Alabama. And so my wife and I went to Alabama for a season, did that, and then in 2016 moved back home to West Tennessee, where in 2020, unexpectedly, the sitting state senator decided not to run again. That position was vacant. That's a rare thing to have a vacant position with no incumbent running. So I just kind of, um, made the decision to try to return to the legislature, but on the Senate side, and was fortunate in 2020 to be elected serving District 26 and then was reelected in 2024 for a second 4-year term.
Well, yeah, that's definitely good to know. So, what have been some of your best bills that you got through when you were a state assemblyman and some that you supported as state senator?
Well, some of the ones that I'm most proud of, one was I mentioned the creation of the Department of Children's Services. Another had to do with um, making sure that annexation was handled appropriately. That is, at that time, it was kind of the Wild West that municipalities could just annex anywhere they wished, and people that didn't want to be annexed, even people in adjacent counties, were subject to cities annexing. And being from Fayette County originally, we did not want the city of Memphis annexing land or other Shelby County cities annexing our people in Fayette County because we knew they wouldn't get the services and representation they needed. So I was able to sponsor and pass that. I have, since being in the Senate, I have been very fortunate to collaborate with Governor Lee and our House members and pass the legislation that uh, helped uh, attract Ford Motor Company to Haywood County for Blue Oval City, at that time, the largest private investment ever in the state of Tennessee by a private company, Ford building their largest plant ever. And that's still, underway. Uh, Passed some legislation, a lot of legislation related to children and families. Another one I'm very proud of was one we did this last year where everyone complains about our road conditions and how they are in need of repair, resurfacing. But Tennessee is a very, understandably conservative state, and we don't go into debt to do that. So how do you pave roads when you don't have the money to pave more roads? Well, we were able to put the sales tax off of new and used tires into our road fund and was able to transfer that over to get that done. So that was another one that I'm proud of. And you caught me a little off guard with some of the others. I know after a career of 15 years in the legislature, I could come up with several of them, but those are just a few that jump to mind. Another one that I just heard from someone today that was the beneficiary of that we had a couple of uh, workplace deaths here in Hardin County over the last several years at one particular facility, and really the way that our workers' compensation benefits were structured, it did not provide adequately for surviving, wives and family members. So we got that changed where now, if there is such a tragedy, at least we can make sure that the survivors are fairly taken care of. So that was just, it sounds small, but most of my legislation, Alexander, really revolves around what are the needs of my constituents in my district, what are the needs of our communities in my district. Um, so that's what I focus on primarily is really being a champion of our local constituents and our communities across my district.
Yeah, I like that you got Memphis not able to annex more of your rural county
Yeah,
because I think, unfortunately, a lot of rural counties are underserved, rural areas, because they have less of a voice, less representation. So I'm glad that you're being a good state senator and trying to fight for your people. So that's definitely something that's important.
thank you, Alexander.
Yeah, so could you tell the audience a little bit about the Tennessee Century Farms Act?
Yeah, the Tennessee Century Farms Act was something that the governor had proposed, and it was really designed to get at the challenge we have in Tennessee, and we do in America, of the rapid loss of farmland. And when I say loss of farmland, I mean for development. That could be, business or industrial development, residential development, uh, or it could be people that are putting land into other use like solar farms. One of the things we wanted to do was to have another tool in the toolbox was to uh, give farmers and foresters an opportunity, if they wished, to voluntarily place their land into a collaborative trust. It does not take away from them any decision making when it comes to what to plant or not plant, what to harvest or not harvest, but it just puts it in a category whereby they are going to um, be allowed to have the benefit uh, of the security to know that this will go into perpetuity, being passed from generation to generation, or being sold if they ever wish. But it'll protect that land, and it will uh, allow them to be compensated fairly for that by this trust, uh, not just on the based on the assessment of its just value, but on the also taking into account its productivity, with the crops and whatnot. So I'm not doing the best job of explaining that. I haven't reviewed, my notes on that in months and months. But that in general, it's designed to try to give farmers and foresters, landowners with these uh, tracts of land an opportunity to preserve them in partnership with a recognized land trust.
So are they able to take their land out of the land trust later if they'd like to, or is it in perpetuity?
Um, you know, Best of my recollection, they could take it out of there.
Okay.
It's all voluntary. Mhm.
That's good to know. So how can Tennessee better protect family farms and landowners from economic and regulatory pressures?
Well, right now our farmers are in a real tough situation, particularly our soybean farmers in Tennessee, because they've gotten caught up in the federal conversation about tariffs. And of
Right.
course, China has not been buying our soybeans. They've been buying them from Argentina, I think. So one of the things is to work closely with our federal officials to make sure that their interests are recognized. And there has been a bit of a bailout for farmers. It probably is not going to be enough for this year to see them through this difficult season when there are these global uh, issues of tariffs and then counter tariffs that we're all experiencing. But some of the things we can do is just make sure that we um, do what's necessary to incentivize farmers and landowners to keep their land in arable situations. So uh, a lot of the land down in some of our counties, farmers are taking it and leasing that out to solar farms. And I'm not opposed to that because we're very much committed to states' property rights in our state. And if you
Right.
own the land, you can do what you want largely with that land. Now, you can't create a landfill or something that's going to obviously have a spillover effect on your neighbor, but you by and large, have the choice of how you manage your own property. But we need to make sure that we don't demonize farmers and let extreme environmentalists try to sit in judgment of their best practices for farming. Nobody wants to do better than farmers and foresters and or better stewards and conservationists than they are. We got to make sure that we don't overly burden them with regulations, and we also have to, I think, be very fair with issues around wetlands and property taxes and whatnot to reinforce the fact that these people are providing the food and fiber for our state and for our country, and we need to make sure we take care of them.
I definitely agree. I think the farmers are what feeds America, and farming is a huge part of Tennessee. So I think that's good that the state government is working to protect the soybean farmers because I think they're definitely under a lot of trouble with these tariffs right now.
They
With
are, and agriculture and forestry are our biggest business by far, and so you know, it's very important that we take care of our biggest business.
I definitely agree. So you did mention property tax, so I want to run this by you and see what you think. So what do you think of getting rid of property taxes for people's primary residence only, not for rentals or anything like that? Maybe for small farms, getting rid of property tax if that's their primary residence. What do you think of doing that in the state of Tennessee? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think that we've done a good job heretofore with making sure that in many cases, uh, properties, let's say, that are in Greenbelt are assessed at a lower uh, rate for property taxes. So we have expanded the Greenbelt provision. Matter of fact, I was the co-sponsor of that, or the sponsor of it a couple of years ago. It's something else I'm very proud of. Um, I think that when it comes to saying we're going to eliminate property taxes on whatever that might be, we really have to be careful and talk about how do you offset the loss of that revenue, because property taxes are the primary way that counties operate. You know, to some degree, municipalities too. Municipalities have some sales tax, but counties are dependent upon property tax to manage, county services, ambulances, fire, police, sheriff, etc. So I'm always open to the idea of what can we do to, make sure that we keep our taxes at a fair, manageable level. And if we can reduce them without a loss of desired services, that's great. But it's just like I mentioned to you, Alexander, everybody wants their road resurfaced where it's smooth and it doesn't tear their car up. Well, if you want your road resurfaced, we have to pay for that. To pay for that, we have to have gas tax or some other revenue, but primarily gas tax. Our gas tax hasn't changed since 2017, and so and cars have gotten more fuel efficient, so you sell less gas. We have electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles that don't use any or as much gas, and then you have uh, increased traffic with all the people moving to Tennessee, grinding our roads down. I get 10 times more calls about road conditions than every other issue combined. Well, I can say, let's lower the gas tax. But what that means is let's lower our ability to take care of your roads. We can't do it now. So all I'm using that is for an example of if we want to make adjustments in property taxes, we need to talk about what services are we willing to give up, to offset the loss in revenue.
Yeah, I definitely think that if we do get rid of property taxes for primary residents, the money would need to be made somewhere else, whether that's sales taxes, some other
Right.
type of tax. So those taxes would go up. I just thought it might be a good idea to get rid of property taxes, especially since there's a lot of low income people and people who can't afford to have their house after they owned it for, say, 30 years and then they lose their house because of
Yeah.
property taxes. Just seems pretty sad to me. But I get what you're saying though too. That's
And
definitely.
we do have a program the state has had for some time for, seniors and for people that have, needs like the disabled to offset their property taxes with a property tax abatement program. It doesn't have a lot of money in it anymore, but we've been using it.
Oh, I didn't even know about that. Thanks for telling me about that.
Sure.
Uh,
Sure.
okay, well, let's move into the next question. So, education policy has been a major focus of your legislative work. How do you balance parental rights, student safety, and academic outcomes when shaping education laws?
Well, Alexander, you're right. One of the reasons I mentioned that I wanted to run for state representative all the way back in 1990, 35 years ago, was because our education system was really struggling. We didn't have the funding for our rural schools in it, so there was a lawsuit that said that the state of Tennessee was disproportionately funding urban schools at the expense of rural schools. We changed the funding formula back then in the early 90s to something called the BEP, the Basic Education Plan. And it was a new way of financing schools so that they got equity, that rural schools and urban schools were treated the same. Um, Over 30 plus years, that formula you know, uh, has needed to be altered. So we changed it again a couple of years ago. Uh, at the same time, we have had to really ramp up our commitment to safety in schools because of the horrific school shootings that we've seen. And so we have invested heavily so that every school can have, monies that they need for a SRO, a school resource officer. Uh, every school can have that. and have other monies to do other hardware related things, be it metal scanners or cameras or whatever might be needed. You can't do enough of that, but we're doing a lot of that. The other thing, though, that I think has captured people's attention recently is the whole issue about private school vouchers and the government uh, really redirecting dollars that have been going into public education into vouchers that some parents can obtain uh, with the idea that that's giving them greater choice of where to send their schools. One of the challenges I think that we did not evaluate and we're supposed to have had is, does this even work? For about 3 or 4 years, we've had a pilot project in Shelby, Davidson, and Hamilton counties on this. Um, we're going to be seeing a report on it in January from the comptroller. My belief is we're going to see that it has certainly not lived up to expectations. There have not been an improvement in academic performance. Now there might be parents saying they like it better, but we have an obligation constitutionally to provide for a free public education for every student. One of the things that has also been problematic has been the ability of schools to cherry pick who they want with these vouchers. If you understand, they might take the best athlete or the straight A student, but if you have a special need, or if your English is a second language, or if you're have some disability, many won't take you. I just last week talked to a family where they had two children. One is a stellar student, one has some very significant special needs. The school that they were trying to use their vouchers for would take the one good student, but not the special needs student. That's wrong. Uh, so that's a concern I have. Financially, we are putting ourselves in a very precarious situation. The expanded voucher program that passed last year, that basically put 20,000 vouchers out. It half of them did have an income cap, the other half didn't. But what we're seeing is that our state did not even bother to see where these vouchers being used. What we have been finding anecdotally is that they're going to students that were already in private school. Now, is that right? That's not the purpose for which they were necessarily created, but it's happening. So there's some real questions to me about it. And then we're looking at the idea of expanding it again without proof that it even is effective. I think that's not good stewardship of taxpayer dollars personally. And I think it jeopardizes the rural schools in my district, which are all rural schools. I don't have the benefit of living necessarily, if you think it's a benefit, in a urban area with lots of schools from which you might choose. We have, by and large, counties that have a school system, one school system, that many times is the largest employer in the county as well, providing for all the kids. And so we need to make sure that we do the best for them first. And so that's my priority.
I think you brought up a very important point of discrimination. I think that's too bad that someone with special needs doesn't get the same voucher as somebody who would be a good student. So I think that's important to note. One thing that I have a question of is it seems like homeschooling is definitely growing in the state of Tennessee. There's more and more homeschooling families. What are your thoughts on having a voucher or some sort of money go to them for their cost of schooling and stuff? Because as of right now, unfortunately, homeschool families are kind of discriminated against. They're not given any money for schooling at all.
Well, I'll tell you what's particularly interesting, Alexander, with that point is they don't, by and large, they don't want it. The legislature was lobbied by the homeschool associations to not include them in it because here's the other thing that I didn't mention. If you take that voucher, you are inviting the state into your operation.
Mm.
Most homeschoolers don't want being told what curriculum to use or not use, what test to use or not use, uh, and to have that kind of micromanagement. Neither do most private schools. And so that's been another real concern is that, usually if you take someone's money, you're obligated in some form or fashion to them for certain, certain things. And many don't want to be told, by the state of Tennessee. That's the reason they liked where they ended up in the, in the homeschooling. We don't want to have to march to the state's drum. And so
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's why it hasn't happened intentionally.
Yeah, I guess I get your point, and that does make sense that they would have to do what the state wants. Is there any way that bill could be shaped so the money could come out with no strings attached? Or do you think that's an impossible hurdle to overcome?
You know, when we say with no strings attached, I think one of the things we have to recognize is that we have a responsibility as a state and as a nation to educate good citizens, virtuous people. That was the whole point of a free public education was for a republic to really succeed, it has to have educated, virtuous people. When you say, here's a check, um, don't call, you don't have to account for it in any way, shape, or form as far as what it's going for, as if your child is educated or not. That's just something that a lot of folks, including myself, it causes us pause. Um, you know, our public schools are responsible for their product. Now, a lot of people are critical. They don't think the product that they're getting from any of the public schools is where it should be. And I would not argue with that in some cases, and even many cases. But you are having to show that with that investment, you have a student who can read, write, do math, pass an exam, and be a contributing, uh, citizen in our society. So I think to have a bill that says, no, you don't have to do anything, that's that might be a tall order.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and maybe there's some middle ground that could be worked out and something like that. But
Mhm.
it sounds like vouchers for homeschoolers isn't going to be a huge thing in the future. Uh,
Yeah.
so, what's the biggest challenge facing rural Tennessee right now? Economy, healthcare, or education?
I don't know that you can separate those. Education and healthcare are part of what drive the economy. For in our rural areas, if your community doesn't have access to a hospital, and emergency healthcare, if your community doesn't have good schools, you're not going to attract employers that can provide good jobs and drive the economy. So it's kind of a three-legged stool. You got to have each leg or the stool is going to collapse.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they're all kind of interconnected for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So, looking ahead, what legislation are you currently working on for next year on that you believe will have the greatest long-term impact on families and communities in your district and across Tennessee?
Well, there are several. I'll spend time on a couple of them. Uh, uh, One of them relates to generating more revenue to put into road maintenance,
Mhm.
and that is modeling us after something's done in some other states, including Kentucky, where if you have an electric vehicle and you're using a public charging station, let's say at a Love's or Pilot station or the old country store, and you're using that recharge station, that you're going to be paying an additional, surcharge, which will go into providing for road maintenance. Now, the reason for that is we pay for our roads with a gas tax. If you're not buying gas, you're using our roads for free. So we want everybody, particularly out of state drivers, if you're going to have the privilege of driving on Tennessee roads, you're going to have to help pay for their maintenance. So that's one. And anything that has to do with trying to improve ability to finance road improvements is something that's important to me. Um, I've got uh, another bill I'm working on, which I won't go into much detail on, but it has to do with something called ibogaine. Ibogaine is a naturally occurring uh, drug, kind of in that psychedelic family, but it's been shown to have remarkable impact on folks that have long-term opioid abuse or PTSD, particularly for our servicemen who have come back with, trauma and nightmares. And this is a naturally occurring medication that has great promise for almost one trial resolution of these issues. Can you imagine taking something one time and not, instead of having to take something every day for a lifetime, or having to take something every day to hopefully ward off some of these uh, you know these intrusive flashbacks and thoughts and pain, uh, when one trial might could get it resolved. So we're looking at the idea of maybe having some clinical trials on that in Tennessee. Texas is doing this. They've put $50 million into the trials for this. We're not going to be doing that, but we want to make sure that we offer our citizens who are suffering, with issues of opioid addiction, of post-traumatic stress disorder, our servicemen who have come back with trauma, that we're going to do everything we can to see if we can, give you options. So that's another one I'm kind of interested in.
Yeah, well, if that works, that sounds like it would be a great help to a lot of people. So that's very important, I think.
Yeah,
I haven't researched it myself, so I don't know the information on it, but from what you said, it sounds very important.
I
Uh,
think I think it is. So those are just a couple of, a couple of three that I think are that I think have some real intrigue for this upcoming session to me.
yeah, that's definitely great. And I just wanted to take the time to share your social media, your Instagram, right
Thank
here.
you.
And you can follow a page on Instagram. He has a lot of great posts, a lot of great things he's doing, and his biggest page is on Facebook. You can follow him on Facebook, and he has a lot of great posts there too. Is there
Thank
any
you.
other social media people can follow you on page?
That's really it. The Facebook is where I do the vast majority of it. Instagram. Um, I'm not a. I do have a new web page uh, that I could refer people to that I is just now getting completed and updated. I'm gonna let me see if I can quickly. I want to make sure that I call up exactly the right um, site for you. It's P Walley, PWALLEY, the number four, Senate, SENATE.org. P Walley for Senate.org. And
Okay,
it's a little bit of a work in progress, but it's pretty well done.
I'm gonna share my screen again so everybody can see that. One moment. Okay, here it is. P. Wally for Senate.org. Listening to you and working for you and your family.
Yeah, that's it.
150 legislative wins, 1,000 families helped. That's pretty good stats. 1,000 families, that's a lot of people.
Well, that's what most of my work is. As a psychologist, I've been able to, I think, bring my um, interest and abilities into the legislature to do the one-on-one work on behalf of constituents and their families and communities. I have over 40 small cities in my district, which is more than anybody. So that's important to me to make sure we collaborate with our local government to get things done.
That's definitely true. And I guess for my last question, what do you think of increasing representation for rural counties in the state level? Because at least I looked at California's history and they used to have a state senator for every county.
Yeah,
So every county had a state senator and it was not based on population, it was based on county to give
yeah,
more voice to the rural counties. Like,
yeah.
do you think there's any way we can increase representation for the rural areas or not really at this point?
Well, I'd love to see it, but it's funny. We used to have that. I mean, 70 years ago, they had a different way of drawing districts in Tennessee. But there was a lawsuit back, and I think it might have been in the early 60s, a national one that basically was referred to as one person, one man, one vote. That, a person that lived in this district or this county, their vote wouldn't count any more than someone in this district or this county. And in order to do that, you have to have districts that are the same population size. And so that's what we base everything on is population. So our districts vary tremendously as far as geography. My district is one of, if not the largest in the state. It takes you 3 hours to drive across it. It has 8 counties. One of my colleagues in Memphis, Shelby County, has a district that he can drive across in 15 minutes. It's compact. It's
Yeah.
made up of a lot of the, East Memphis and other cities within Shelby County. We're not going to be able to go to where there's just a one per county, even though that sounds wonderful. But then all of a sudden, if Shelby County or Davidson County had one person, and then Hardeman County had one person, all of a sudden the one person in Hardeman County representing 27,000, their vote counts as much as the one person Shelby County representing 1 million people. So that would run into some trouble.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I find it odd that they repealed that law nationwide because our United States government, small states wouldn't have a voice if they didn't get two senators for each state, and then the House is based off population. So
Right.
I don't know, it might be a non-starter even to try to get each
I
county.
like your way of thinking though. I wish each county could have the same number of senators, and the House then could do the proportional thing, like you say. That would change things a bit.
Yeah, like it might be worth looking into maybe putting a bill because maybe the courts have changed. Courts do change and they recognize different laws at different times. So maybe if the Tennessee legislator worked for a bill like that and got it passed, maybe the courts wouldn't do anything against it this time.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's a good idea. Well, I certainly appreciate the time to be with you today, Alexander.
Oh, well, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add in this video?
Just how much I appreciate the privilege of serving as senator from District 26 and representing, I hope, all Tennesseans, regardless of uh, party, of race, of income, doing it fairly and making sure we take care of our people. That's what people are first, and parties are way down the line.
I think you're definitely right about that. I think that's a good thing to know. And we really appreciate you coming on and sharing all your insight and all this information. And the people really appreciate you taking the time to do this as well.
My pleasure, and let me know if I can be helpful in the future.
Okay, well, thank you, Paige. And thank you all to the viewers who are watching. Please follow Paige on Facebook and Instagram. And please share this video with as many friends as you can. And thanks again for watching.